I'm Matt Hagman, and this is Opportunity Miami, a podcast about people and ideas shaping Miami's economic future. Across Greater Miami, our built environment, whether houses or high-rises, are responsible for more climate warming emissions than anything else, with the exception of cars and buses and how we get around, transportation. It's a key problem to address if we were to stop climate change. That's increasing sea levels here in Miami and resulting in extreme heat and wildfires in other parts of the world. But does it also present a transformational business opportunity? One company thinks so. Brooklyn-based BlocPower makes it faster and cheaper to decarbonize buildings. Not only that, create jobs and drive social mobility. But how? BlocPower's Ian Harris joined us to explain. Ian Harris, welcome.
Thank you so much. Appreciate you having me, Matt.
So let's start with the premise of BlocPower, turning buildings into Teslas. Tell us how.
Our goal is to make buildings greener, healthier, and smarter. So we are fully integrated, one-stop shop, turnkey solution, assisting building owners in the transition of becoming more energy efficient. We start with a basis analysis of the building, how it's performing, then try to walk them through the process of actually implementing an energy efficient measure. Might it be lighting, transition from oil to gas, or getting off of fossil fuels, solar installation, any sort of measure that will improve the efficiency of their building overall.
So what sort of structures are we talking about? Are these, single-family homes, mid-rise office buildings, high-rise apartments?
Sure, absolutely. Our organization does have a main focus and a priority on your mid and small size buildings. Being an organization that's out of Brooklyn, New York, we do have a focus on your sort of pre-war walk-up buildings. But over the years, our sort of expertise and our capabilities have expanded quite significantly. So we do have capabilities of working with your community centers, your nonprofit organizations, your houses of worships, as well as some single-family homes as well.
So, as we think around the built environment, like here in Miami, for example,
Sure.
It is the second biggest emitter of climate warming gases after transportation, after how we get around, cars and trucks and all of that. As we think about the built environment, what are the primary obstacles to turning a building to one that's carbon neutral or net zero or green or whatever we want to call it?
Sure. I mean, sometimes you have to be sort of frank and transparent in this conversation in the first place, right? The building itself is actually not making the decision. It's actually the building owner, right? So convincing the building owner that this is a worthwhile investment, that they can see the returns on their investment, and that it is going to provide them with more efficiency, a cleaner environment, and provide them with the state-of-the-art equipment. As well as just understanding that the process within itself is challenging and does have a lot of cooks at the table. We're talking about the utility companies, we're talking about the municipalities, the installers, the building owners, the investors. So trying to sort of corral or herd all those individuals to identify an opportunity that's in the best interest of all parties can be challenging.
So as we think about is there a sort of a general checklist if you're a property owner, like a property owner here in Miami, a general checklist of the things that we'd want to address? It relates to sort of where getting power from, how to cool and heat a home, to how we light a place. Is that it? Or what does that list look like?
Sure. I mean, let's just start from the beginning, right? Like, where are your pain points, right? As a building owner, no one knows their building better than those that own and operate them. So what have been some of the challenges that you've lived in this space, that you've owned this property? Is it the bills are too high? Do you have an inconsistent system that's not reliable? Do you have a system that's at its end of life, right? And then understanding sort of what is the key factor to actually making this decision. Are we being driven by money? Are you fortunate enough, or are we lucky enough to be working with a climate change warrior? Are you looking to sort of make a capital investment to pass on to the next generation? So, just understanding the building owners' why, understanding their pain points, and then hopefully providing them with the appropriate solution.
Got it. And so what are some of the biggest and latest projects? I mean, you're doing, you will work with an individual building owner, but also, for example, in Ithaca, New York, you're working with tackling whole blocks. Talk about some of the projects.
Yeah, we're fortunate to have a great partnership and opportunity in the city of Ithaca, which is upstate New York. Many people may know it because of Cornell University. But we're talking about large scale, enterprise level, city level electrification, the ability for us to work not only with the residents, but those that are working in these communities, praying in these communities, eating in these communities, to allow them to transition to make their buildings cleaner, healthier, and smarter. This is something that we're trying to replicate across the entire country. We're fortunate enough to have similar sort of endeavors and opportunities in the state of California, and then hopefully we can expand that to some additional states throughout the entire country. So again, it's enterprise level. It's working directly with the municipality, identifying a swath or an area within that city that we can work on this electrification process.
And so how does that work from so you're talking to a local government, they then say, all right, we want to tackle these blocks. How does then that translate into the property owners in that particular area then jumping in? What are those levers that prompt them to say, I'm in?
I mean, first and foremost, right, you have to make this efficient, right? We have to sort of knock down the barriers of entry. So we've always identified and sort of leveraged data, might it be public data, data that which we can obtain through the relationships with utility companies, and run an analysis on the buildings or the area that we're going to be working on. And then we'll build out an actual program itself, sort of what is the program, how it's going to be implemented, who are going to be the priorities. Are we going to be looking at single family homes? Are we going to be looking at our community centers? Are we going to look at our multifamily buildings? And then identify what's the best solution forward. Is it just lighting? Is it electrification? Is it the installation of solar? So it's first and foremost doing a proper analysis, having a baseline in terms of where the challenges may be, and then building out the appropriate programming to provide the opportunity and the assistance to the actual building owners and residents to make this transition.
Got it. And what is, in doing all that, is there ultimately, in thinking about looking at the data, is there a scorecard for success? I mean, what ultimately is that end goal, that end state of like, this has worked?
For sure. I think from our standpoint, it's how many people can we get off of fossil fuels? How many buildings, how many residents can we allow them to transition to a cleaner, more energy efficient future by electrifying their home? Are we going to electrify their heating systems? Are we going to be electrifying their domestic hot water? Are we going to be electrifying their cooling? So that for us is a measure of success, how many buildings that we can actually tackle.
Got it. Now, you talked about the work that you're doing in Ithaca. Also said you're in California too.
Sure.
For cities, got a lot of cities here in Miami-Dade County.
Absolutely.
For cities that aspire to be places with buildings that are electrified and turning the building environment to one that takes one step closer to transitioning to a net zero economy, what should those cities be doing?
I mean, again, it's having a baseline, having a clear understanding. I think what we've seen within the market is sometimes the municipalities are just unclear about exactly who needs help, what is the extent of the help. So understanding what data is out there, what kind of analysis can be had in terms of what is their consumption like, what is their burdens like, and then running a program based off of their feedback. So do we need this from a financing standpoint? Do we need this from a workforce perspective, right? All the work that we're doing is great, but we actually need people to install it. So what we've seen in the market is that a lot of times coupling the programming of actually implementation with a workforce component has been very beneficial and appealing to these various municipalities across the country. So working on the ground, hearing from the building owners, and then identifying the appropriate programming with workforce, incentives, and then hopefully implementation.
So if I hear you correctly, for cities, for communities, really a first step is understanding sort of where they're at, where we're at.
Correct.
And that's what you do. You do these full-blown analyses of a neighborhood, of a block, of an individual building to
Correct.
see sort of where those pain points are and then get about trying to address them.
Absolutely. That is correct.
Talk about the role of policy versus entrepreneurship. I mean, the two places you mentioned, California and New York, have adopted policies that have really tried to stir a more aggressive posture as it relates to getting off of fossil fuels. Other places, less so. For the kind of work that you're talking about, for the kind of results and the impact you're kind of trying to drive, how important is policy in all of this?
It absolutely is part of the table. It's actually part of the sort of puzzle that we're trying to solve. Policy is only going to benefit the opportunities. It's only going to make it easier, right? When you incentivize individuals to do this, when you provide mandates or sort of push people or organizations or institutions in a specific direction, hopefully in the direction of electrification, hopefully in the direction of removing their resiliency or their reliance on fossil fuel. The work that we do would not be successful if we didn't have policy involved. Now, to say that maybe the markets are changing, I think you need to sort of appreciate that what you can do at the municipality level is different than what you can do at a town level, a larger city or a state level. So understanding your local politics and then trying to leverage that to the best of your ability to actually implement the work that we do.
How quick are we getting, though, to the state where sort of entrepreneurship, market forces alone drive the shift? That is, you talk about turning businesses into Tesla.
Sure.
Right? Arguably, Tesla has had so much success in shifting the entire auto industry to one that now is moving to electric.
Absolutely.
By creating a product that is cooler, faster, something that people just wanted, and it was less that people were doing it because of some policy change. It was instead something that they aspired to.
For sure.
Are we getting closer as we think about the built environment where the same sort of aspiration and market forces are at work as well?
Absolutely. If you were to ask that same question maybe 10 years ago, I think I would have a very different answer. But I think we've all been exposed or experiences the sort of unfortunate impacts of climate change over these last couple of years. Might it be superstorms or sort of just a changing environment that which you're living in, right? So when you talk about some of those market forces, maybe they're not necessarily keeping up with entrepreneurship as you referenced, but the market now is exploding with opportunities in terms of solutions, opportunities, investments all around the green economy. Might it be investments in new technology, investments in organizations such as BlocPower to allow us to do the work that we're doing, and then even just investments to help people to actually make the transition. So greater incentives, more opportunities even from a level of cheaper equipment. So, the market is expanding quite rapidly. Is it improving or expanding fast enough? I think we would say no. But it's our responsibility and hopefully the responsibility of other entrepreneurs to say that collectively we can move the force here.
Yeah. Now you alluded to earlier to training, and in so many ways with BlocPower talking about how it's not only resulting in creating net zero buildings, carbon free, carbon neutral buildings, but it's also something that can drive social mobility and create jobs.
Absolutely.
Talk about that.
I think we can all recognize and see the value of those that become, skills trade, right? I think if you were to look back maybe 60, 50 years ago, right, it was a very honest profession. It was a profession that I think a lot of people went into. I think now what we're seeing in the market is that, there's not enough individuals that are of a certain caliber to actually do the installation or the type of installations that we're looking for. So when you talk about an opportunity for social mobility, there are hundreds and hundreds of thousands, and if not millions of individuals that are looking for work, looking for greater opportunities. And the skill trade that's required to combat climate change will allow them to be sort of in the job market for the 21st century. So, this is everything from your HVAC installers to your solar installers, but those are just sort of one piece of the actual installation process. All of those individuals are going to be working with project managers, right? We also need more engineers. So, there's a whole litany of jobs that will be created as we make this transition.
Interesting. So this is like the epitome, you'd argue, of sort of the win-win-win. We're
Absolutely.
decarbonizing buildings, creating jobs, driving social mobility, and making this
Correct.
transition. You've also done work around internet access,
Yep.
and of course in cities and towns across the country, and here in Miami, of course, too.
Mm-hmm.
The lack of internet access remains a real issue.
For sure.
By last count here in Miami-Dade County, 80% of households were connected to the internet. In other words, 2 in 10 are not. Obviously, a big, big issue. You've leaned into helping solve this. Talk about how you've been working to address it.
For sure. I think there's 2 parts to that. When you say connectivity is one thing, but reliability is also another thing. You talk about high-speed internet, right? I think we need to start looking at the internet and the ability for you to connect as a utility. It should no longer be seen as sort of a luxury of some sorts, right? It's a necessity. I think when you talk about the pandemic and the challenges that we all experience from remote work, from learning remotely from our children, it only exasperated what we've already knew, right? That more people need to be connected, people need to be the opportunity to have reliable internet. Over the pandemic, sort of we saw that opportunity in the market, and fortunately we partnered with a number of organizations as well as some of our institutional investors to deploy Wi-Fi capabilities to numerous cities. So we have opportunities in Oakland, California, and in New York City where we identified sort of communities that we can build a mesh network. So you talk about your houses of worship, your community centers, we utilize that as a hub, and then we're able to connect other organizations and other communities around to the capabilities of tapping into that network.
So essentially, it's that you have several buildings in relatively close proximity, creating
Correct.
this network where everything in between has internet access, and in this case, I take it high-speed internet access.
That is correct.
And is that something that, and 100% agree, of course, I mean, internet access needs to be just like running water and electricity.
Absolutely.
And of course, with the infrastructure bill, with the huge federal investment, the opportunities in front of us to get there. Is this something that you're doing by working with municipalities, with a collection of property owners? What does this look like so far?
It's a little bit of both, right? I think at the end of the day, we could always partner with our municipalities. They too see the void, and they too see that there's a great opportunity for sort of them to invest into these infrastructure projects, but also going to the actual building owners themselves. If there's a large co-op, if there's a large property owner that realizes that maybe those within his building don't necessarily have reliable or internet in the first place. So being able to partner with people on the ground, with municipalities, with other local organizations that are doing the similar work to allow us to scale is something that's been very beneficial for us.
What about, as we think about decarbonizing buildings, one of the big things, there are a lot of places, and Florida is among them, where in terms of where you get your power from, you don't have a lot of choices, right? And oftentimes it's actually, you have one place where you get your power from.
Correct.
In those instances, what do you do? What do you advise clients who, they can do everything else, right? They can move everything within a structure to electric, but there's still the big question mark about where that power is coming from.
Absolutely an elephant in the room, right? I think we all recognize from an individual standpoint, you can do a lot, but there are just natural constraints due to the infrastructure, due to the sort of makeup of your utility, where they source their energy. Those are scenarios in which we're still trying to work with utilities on a large scale. Talk about infrastructure money, when you talk about municipalities and governments, about them making those investments into a cleaner economy, that work relies on them. But from an individual basis, from a community basis, from a houses of worship perspective, you can do your part. You can electrify your building, right? You can get off of fossil fuels and make your building cleaner, healthier, and smarter.
What do you think? And this is going back to our discussion about Tesla and what we've seen with the auto industry, how the auto industry is making that shift. What do you think needs to happen for the built environment to make that shift? And people that an office owner that decarbonizes their building, that they see that actually rents are going up and more more tenants want to be in that building. How close are we to a tipping point like that? And what else needs to be done, do you think, for that to happen?
I think time, unfortunately, right? We do need to be a little patient, but we can do a lot to actually move the needle. I think we are starting to see the prices of implementation are starting to go down, right? But there are a lot of moving parts, right? So one part of it is just the natural sort of reduction in terms of the cost for the equipment, right? Naturally, more and more the equipment is being built. It's coming to the market at a much cheaper price. Simultaneously, we do need a larger workforce, right? We do need to make sure that we have the necessary installers to implement these projects. We need to communicate with the municipalities. We need to communicate with the local utility companies. So I do think that we are moving in the right direction in terms of moving the needle. Focus on your policy, right? Focus on opportunities to show the financial returns. In many of these scenarios, people are going to look at this from a bottom line perspective. What is the opportunity in terms of savings? What is my financial return on the work that I'm going to do? So trying to hone in on that and trying to move the needle is what we can best do.
But I guess as you say that, working to turn buildings into Teslas, that you think within the built environment, within buildings, ultimately what's happened in the auto industry, your thinking is the same will happen in the built environment too.
Yeah. In a matter of time, right? You'll see a major shift. And I think when you talk about the Teslas, when you talk about sort of the work that Elon did, I think he just started to sort of move the entire industry forward, right? He started to run ahead. People started to see the financial returns. They started to see that there was an opportunity for greater implementation. And now you see some of the larger automakers starting to sort of, adapt and address it as much as possible.
So as you think about success, as you think about 10 years from now, let's even think about 2040. What do you hope you'll find, and what will success look like?
I think from us, we'll see less people relying on fossil fuels, right? People won't be burning oil. They won't be burning gases. They'll get these old, dirty equipment out of their buildings. We'll see more people relying on solar. We'll see more people fully electrifying their buildings. And it's not even just people. It's full-scale electrification from a municipality standpoint. So it's more than just the city of Ithaca. Hopefully it's the city of Miami and many more cities across the entire country that are doing the same work.
All right. So in closing, we always like to wrap up a conversation by sort of thinking about 3 takeaways. And for those who are, whether it's electeds, property owners, maybe it's developers who want to decarbonize buildings, who want to create a decarbonized built environment, as we think about sort of those 3 things that should be top of mind, what are they?
Top of mind, I think, from that individual standpoint would be, first and foremost, that it's not as difficult as you think it is, right? There are resources readily available, that you are making your building cleaner, healthier, and smarter, and there's a great opportunity to create a great job for the future.
Ian Harris, thank you very much. We really appreciate the time.
I appreciate it as well, Matt.
Opportunity Miami is powered by the Miami-Dade Beacon Council. This episode was produced by our editorial manager, Suzette Leboy, with special thanks to Clutch Content Partners. As always, you can reach us with your story ideas, your thoughts, your feedback at next@opportunity.miami. Thanks so much for joining us.